Hey there! Tonight, we're re-diving deep into one of the darkest and most overlooked chapters of the American Civil War. The brutal reality faced by doctors in the rugged mountains of Appalachia. Far from the grand battlefields and historic cities, these healers fought a desperate, invisible war against wounds, disease, and the unforgiving wilderness itself. Supplies were scarce, medicine was crude, and every day was a battle, not just for their patients' lives, but for their own survival. These doctors didn't just patch up injuries. They faced constant exhaustion, isolation, and a terrifying enemy in infection that claimed them almost as fast as their patients. As we explore their stories, you'll see a world where hope and despair lived side by side, and the cost of healing was heartbreakingly high. Before we begin, drop a comment telling me where you're rewatching from. It is amazing to connect with you all across the miles. Now, let's uncover why Civil War doctors in Appalachia died almost as fast as their patients. The Appalachian Mountains rise like a wall between worlds. Steep ridges, tangled forests, and winding hollows stretch for miles, forming a landscape as unforgiving as it is beautiful. In the spring of 1863, you arrive here not as a traveler, but as a surgeon summoned by the war that has finally reached these hills. The Union and Confederate armies have clashed in nearby valleys, and now the wounded are coming. They arrive in silence, borne on crude stretchers made from fence rails and quilts, their faces pale, their eyes vacant. The war in Appalachia is different. It is not fought in open fields or grand campaigns. It is guerrilla, chaotic, and deeply personal. Families are divided. Neighbors turn on each other. Skirmishes erupt without warning. And in the aftermath, the wounded are left to crawl or be carried to whatever shelter they can find. That shelter, more often than not, is a cabin or a barn or a church, hastily converted into a field hospital. You step into one such cabin. The air is thick with the smell of blood, sweat, and wood smoke. A boy lies on a table, no older than 16, his leg shattered by a musket ball. His mother stands nearby, clutching a Bible, her knuckles white. There is no anesthesia, no antiseptic. Just you, your tools, and the knowledge that if you don't act fast, he will die. And if you do act fast, he might still die, and so might you. Appalachia is not just remote, it is medically barren. Supplies are scarce, medicines are improvised, instruments are reused. You boil your scalpel in a kettle, wipe your hands on your apron, and pray that the infection doesn't spread. But it always spreads. The wounded arrive with gangrene already setting in. Their wounds are filled with dirt, splinters, and cloth. You amputate by candlelight, stitch with horsehair, and hope the fever breaks. It rarely does. The terrain makes everything harder. Roads are little more than muddy trails. Rain turns them into rivers. Horses slip. Wagons break. The wounded are carried for miles, jostled and bleeding, their groans echoing through the trees. You wait for them, knowing that every hour lost is a life lost. And when they arrive, you work until your hands shake, not from fatigue, but from illness. Because the doctors are dying too. You sleep in the same cabins. You breathe the same air. You are exposed to the same infections. Typhoid, dysentery, pneumonia. They spread like wildfire. There are no quarantines. No clean water. No rest. You treat a man with fever in the morning and collapse with it by nightfall. The line between healer and patient blurs. And in these mountains, that line is often crossed. The isolation is psychological as well as physical. News from the outside world is sporadic. Letters are delayed. Supplies promised by the army never arrive. You are alone, surrounded by suffering, and haunted by the knowledge that you cannot save everyone, or even most. The wounded die in your arms. The families blame you. And when you fall ill, there is no one left to treat you. Yet you stay, because leaving means abandoning the wounded. Because every life saved is a miracle. Because in the chaos of war, this cabin, this crude, blood-stained room, is the only place where healing is possible. And because you know that if you die here, you will die doing something that matters. The cabin is barely standing. Its roof sags under the weight of wet snow, and the wind slips through the cracks in the walls like a thief. Inside, the air is damp and cold, thick with the scent of mildew and smoke. This is your new home. Not a hospital, not a clinic, just a structure that happens to be upright, and just barely. You arrived with a satchel of tools and a head full of training. But none of it prepared you for this. The wounded are already here, lying on straw mats and wooden planks. Some are conscious, some delirious, some already dead. Their groans rise and fall like a tide, echoing through the night, a chorus of agony that never stops. You try to sleep, but sleep is a luxury. Every hour brings another knock at the door, another stretcher dragged in from the woods, another body broken by war. There is no front line here. The war is everywhere and nowhere. Skirmishes erupt without warning. Gunfire crackles in the distance, then vanishes into silence. Civilians are caught in the crossfire. Soldiers desert and become bandits. The wounded are not just soldiers. They are farmers, children, women, and they all come to you. Your cabin becomes a sanctuary and a tomb. You clear space where you can, pushing aside crates and broken furniture to make room for the injured. You hang lanterns from nails and stack firewood in the corner, hoping it will last through the night. You ration your supplies, morphine, bandages, quinine, knowing that once they're gone for good. You begin to understand the rhythm of suffering. Mornings are quiet, the cold keeping most indoors. But by midday, the wounded arrive. Some are carried in wagons, others dragged on sleds. They come with shattered limbs, bullet wounds, frostbite. You triage instinctively who can be saved, who must be made comfortable, who is already lost. It is a brutal calculus, and it weighs on you. The tools you carry are simple: a bone saw, a scalpel, forceps. You sterilize them as best you can, boiling water, whiskey, fire, but infection is a constant threat. You amputate to save lives, knowing that the odds of survival are slim. You stitch wounds with thread pulled from clothing. You use horsehair when thread runs out. You improvise splints from branches and bandages from torn sheets. The burden is not just physical, it is emotional, spiritual. You watch young men die with their eyes open, whispering for their mothers. You hold the hands of strangers as they slip away. You write letters to families, trying to find words that make sense of senseless death. You bury the dead behind the cabin, marking their graves with stones and scraps of wood. And you begin to change. You stop flinching at the sight of blood. You stop crying when a patient dies. You stop hoping for relief. You become a machine of survival, focused only on the next wound, the next fever, the next breath. But inside, you are unraveling. The isolation eats at you. The cold seeps into your bones. The groans of the dying become a lullaby. You wonder if you are still human. Sometimes you step outside and look at the mountains. They are silent, indifferent. The war has scarred them, but they endure. You envy them. You wish you could be as still, as untouched. But you are not. You are in the thick of it, and there is no escape. Letters from home arrive sporadically. They speak of hope, of victory, of prayers. You read them by candlelight, your hands trembling. You write back, but your words are hollow. You cannot describe what you've seen. You cannot explain the burden you carry. And then, one night, you fall ill. It starts with a cough, then fever, then weakness. You try to work through it, but your hands shake. You collapse while stitching a wound. The patients look at you with fear. You are no longer their savior. You are one of them. You lie in the same straw, breathe the same air, suffer the same fate. There is no one to treat you. The other doctors are dead or gone. The nurses are overwhelmed. You are alone. And in that moment, you understand the cruel irony. The healer has become the wounded. The battlefield has claimed you, not with a bullet, but with exhaustion, exposure, and disease. You recover barely, but you are changed, slower, weaker, haunted. You return to your work, but the burden is heavier now. You know how close death is. You've felt its breath, and you know that next time it may not pass you by. Still, you stay, because leaving means abandoning those who have no one else. Because every life saved is a victory. Because in this cabin, in this war, you have found a purpose that defies the horror. And because you know that even if you die, your work will live on in the lives you've touched, the wounds you've healed, and the stories that will be told long after the war is over. The war in Appalachia is not just fought with rifles and bayonets. It is waged in the bloodstream, in the lungs, in the bowels. It is invisible, insidious, and relentless. Disease is the true enemy here, and it does not discriminate. It kills soldiers and civilians, doctors and nurses, the wounded and the well. You learn this quickly. The first signs are subtle. A patient arrives with a fever, a rash, a cough. You treat him as best you can: cool cloths, herbal tinctures, rest. But the next day, another arrives with the same symptoms. Then another. Soon, the cabin is filled with the sick. They shiver under blankets, their skin blotched and blistered, their eyes glassy. You recognize the signs. Smallpox. There is no vaccine, no quarantine, no understanding of how it spreads. You try to isolate the infected, but space is limited. The air is thick with contagion. Every breath feels dangerous. You wear a cloth over your mouth, but it does little. The disease moves faster than you can react. It leaps from patient to patient, from bed to bed, from hand to hand. Typhoid follows. It comes with high fever, weakness, and abdominal pain. The water is suspect drawn from streams that double as latrines. You boil it when you can, but fuel is scarce. Dysentery joins the chorus, turning the cabin into a place of constant suffering. The floors are soaked with waste. The stench is unbearable. You clean as best you can, but the filth returns. It is a losing battle. You begin to understand the scale of the problem. The wounded are vulnerable open wounds, weakened immune systems, poor nutrition. But even the healthy fall ill. Disease does not wait for injury. It strikes in the night, in the quiet moments, in the spaces between battles. It is the background noise of war, always present, always deadly. You try everything. You mix poultices from local herbs. You administer quinine and whiskey. You bleed patients, hoping to release the sickness. You pray, but nothing works consistently. Some recover, most do not. You watch them waste away, their bodies shrinking, their eyes hollowing. You hold their hands as they die, whispering comfort you do not feel. And then you fall ill. It starts with a chill, then fever, then vomiting. You know the signs. You've seen them too many times. You lie in your cot, sweating and shivering, your mind drifting. You wonder if this is the end. You think of home. You think of the patients you couldn't save. You think of the ones you did. You wonder if it was worth it. You recover barely, but the experience leaves a mark. You are slower now, more cautious, more afraid. You disinfect obsessively, though you know it may not help. You wash your hands until they crack. You sleep in short bursts, always listening for the next cough, the next groan, the next sign that disease has returned. You begin to see patterns. Crowded rooms breed illness. Dirty water kills. Poor nutrition weakens resistance. You try to educate the locals, but superstition runs deep. Some believe disease is punishment. Others think it is carried by spirits. You fight ignorance as much as infection. You write letters to medical authorities, begging for supplies, for guidance, for help. Sometimes they respond. Usually they don't. You are alone, improvising medicine in a place that barely understands it. You become part doctor, part priest, part undertaker. And yet, you persist. Because disease may be the silent enemy, but you are its loud opponent. You speak out. You act. You endure. You save lives, even as your own hangs in the balance. You become a symbol of resistance, not to the war, but to the decay it brings. In the end, you understand that bullets may kill quickly, but disease kills thoroughly. It is the shadow behind every victory, the echo behind every scream. And in these mountains, it is the true master of death. The cabin is quiet, but not peaceful. It is the silence of dread, broken only by the occasional moan or the crackle of fire. You stand over a makeshift operating table, a plank balanced on barrels, covered in a blood-stained sheet. Your tools lie beside you. A bone saw dulled by use, a scalpel with a chipped edge, forceps bent from repeated sterilization over open flame. They are all you have. They are not enough. You light a candle. The flame flickers, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the mountains are still. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of gangrene, sweet, sickly, unmistakable. A young soldier lies before you, his leg blackened and swollen. The infection has spread. There is no time. You must amputate. There is no anesthesia. Ether is a luxury you haven't seen in months. You offer the patient a piece of leather to bite down on. He nods, eyes wide, breathing fast. You whisper something comfort, perhaps, or apology, and begin. The saw bites into flesh, then bone. The sound is wet, gritty, unforgettable. The patient screams, a raw animal sound that echoes through the cabin and into the hills. You work quickly. Speed is mercy. You cauterize the wound with a heated iron, the hiss and smoke adding to the horror. The patient faints. You are grateful. You wrap the stump with cloth torn from a blanket. You mark the severed limb for burial. You clean your tools with whiskey and fire. You prepare for the next patient. This is your routine. You perform dozens of amputations each week. Arms, legs, fingers. Sometimes you remove tissue, sometimes entire limbs. You learn to judge infection by smell, by color, by the way the skin peels. You learn to cut decisively, to stitch quickly, to ignore the screams. You learn to live with blood under your nails and death in your hands. Your bandages are scrap-stone shirts, pillowcases, curtains. You boil them when you can. You reuse them when you must. You know it's dangerous, but there is no alternative. Supplies promised by the army never arrive. You write letters, send messengers, plead with quartermasters. Nothing comes. You improvise constantly. Splints from branches, tourniquets from belts, sutures from horsehair. You sharpen your tools with river stones. You sterilize with boiling water and moonshine. You learn from experience, from failure, from desperation. The cabin becomes a theater of suffering. Patients lie in rows, groaning, praying, dying. You move among them like a ghost, your apron stiff with dried blood, your hands cracked and trembling. You sleep in short bursts, always listening for the next scream, the next knock at the door, the next body dragged in from the cold. You are not alone. Nurses, often local women, assist you. They bring water, hold patients down, clean wounds. They are brave, tireless, and often sick themselves. You rely on them. You mourn them when they die. You begin to understand the psychological toll. The work is relentless. The horror is constant. You see things no one should see: wounds that gape, limbs that rot, eyes that plead. You hear things no one should hear: screams, sobs, final breaths. You feel things no one should feel: guilt, helplessness, rage. And yet you continue, because every amputation is a chance at survival. Every stitch is a defiance of death. Every scream is proof that life still clings. You become hardened, but not numb. You care even when it hurts. You fight even when you're losing. You bury the dead behind the cabin. You mark their graves with stones. You remember their names. You write to their families. You carry their stories. And you keep your tools sharp, because tomorrow another patient will arrive. Another limb will need removing. Another scream will pierce the mountain stillness. And you will be ready. The cold water stings your fingers. It's drawn from a nearby stream, icy and murky, but it's all you have. You scrub your hands, hoping to wash away the blood, the pus, the disease. But you know it's futile. There is no soap, no antiseptic, no understanding of germs. You are fighting a war with bare hands and blind hope. Your tools lie on a table beside you: bone saw, scalpel, forceps. You rinse them in the same water. You wipe them with cloth. You pass them through flame when you can. But they are never truly clean. Rust clings to their edges. Blood stains their handles. They carry death as much as they deliver life. You perform surgery knowing the odds. Infection is not a possibility. It is a certainty. Every wound is a doorway for disease. Every stitch is a gamble. You amputate to save lives, but the stump often festers. You drain abscesses, but the fever returns. You remove bullets, but the body collapses. You watch your patients decline. Their skin turns gray. Their breath grows shallow. Their eyes lose focus. You try everything: herbal poultices, whiskey compresses, prayers. Nothing works. You sit beside them as they die, helpless, haunted. You begin to track the patterns. The ones who die fastest are often the ones you operated on. You realize your tools are killing them. You realize your hands are killing them. You are the vector. You are the risk. You are the mercy and the curse. You write to medical authorities. You beg for carbolic acid, for soap, for knowledge. You hear rumors of doctors in cities experimenting with sterilization. You envy them. You are stuck in the mountains, improvising medicine in a world that doesn't understand it. You try to change. You boil everything: tools, bandages, water. You isolate patients. You clean wounds obsessively. You invent rituals of cleanliness, hoping they help. Sometimes they do. Often they don't. You lose sleep. You lose faith. You lose patience. And yet, you continue. Because even without sterilization, you are their only hope. Because even with infection, some survive. Because even in failure, you learn. You become a pioneer not by choice, but by necessity. You document your methods. You share your findings. You teach others. You build a legacy of trial and error, of pain and perseverance. And you never stop washing your hands. Because in this war, mercy is not sterile. It is messy, desperate, and real. The Appalachian Mountains are beautiful, but they are brutal. Their steep ridges and winding hollows form a natural fortress one that protects and imprisons. For a Civil War doctor, they are a barrier to survival. The terrain is unforgiving. Roads are little more than muddy trails. Bridges collapse. Wagons overturn. Horses falter. And the supplies you desperately need never arrive. You begin each day with a list of what you don't have. No anesthetic, no antibiotics, no morphine, no quinine, no clean bandages, no surgical thread, no antiseptic, no reliable food, no clean water. You stare at your dwindling stockpile, some whiskey, a few strips of cloth, a handful of herbs, and wonder how you'll make it through the day. You become a scavenger. You search abandoned cabins for anything useful: old linens, bottles, tools. You barter with locals, trading tobacco, coffee, or labor for supplies. You learn which plants can be used for pain, which roots can reduce fever, which leaves can clean wounds. You become part doctor, part botanist, part survivalist. You send letters to army depots, begging for shipments. You send messengers down treacherous paths, hoping they reach their destination. Sometimes they do. Usually they don't. You wait for weeks, then months. Nothing comes. You are forgotten. You improvise constantly. You use moonshine as disinfectant. You stitch with fishing line. You splint with fence posts. You boil water over open flame. You sterilize with smoke. You grind bark into powder. You crush berries into paste. You invent medicine from desperation. You ration everything. A single dose of morphine becomes a treasure. A clean bandage is reused until it falls apart. You cut pills in half. You dilute tinctures. You stretch every resource to its breaking point. You watch your patients suffer. You perform amputations without anesthesia. You treat infections without antibiotics. You comfort the dying with nothing but words. You feel helpless. You feel angry. You feel responsible. You begin to understand the cost of isolation. It is not just physical, it is psychological. You are cut off from knowledge, from support, from hope. You are alone in a war that does not care. You are a doctor without tools, a healer without medicine, a soldier without weapons. And yet, you persist. Because every life saved is a victory. Because every wound healed is a miracle. Because every day survived is defiance. You become a legend in the hills. Locals bring you herbs, food, stories. Soldiers seek you out. Families trust you. You are not just a doctor, you are a lifeline. And you never stop searching. Because somewhere, beyond the mountains, there are supplies. There is help. There is hope. And you will find it. The candle burns low, its flame flickering against the cabin wall. You haven't slept in 2 days, maybe 3. Time has lost its shape. The hours blur into one another, marked only by the arrival of the wounded and the fading of the living. You sit hunched over a patient, your hands trembling, your eyes gritty with fatigue. The wound is deep, jagged, infected. You clean it with whiskey, stitch it with thread pulled from a coat. The man groans, his breath shallow. You whisper comfort, though your voice is hoarse. You finish the work, wrap the wound, move on to the next. There is always a next. The wounded arrive in waves, dragged in on sleds, carried on shoulders, limping through the snow. Their injuries are varied gunshots, bayonet slashes, frostbite, gangrene. You triage instinctively. You know who can be saved, who will die, who needs you most. You make choices no one should have to make. You work through the night. The cabin is dim, lit by lanterns and firelight. The air is thick with smoke, blood, and sweat. You move from bed to bed, stitching, amputating, comforting. Your apron is stiff with dry blood. Your boots stick to the floor. Your fingers ache. Your back screams. Your mind drifts. You forget names. You forget meals. You forget yourself. Sleep comes in stolen moments, 10 minutes on a stool, a half hour beside a patient. You wake to screams, to groans, to the knock of another stretcher at the door. You rise, blurry-eyed, and begin again. Your body weakens. You lose weight. Your hands shake. Your vision blurs. You cough. You sweat. You shiver. You know you're sick, but there's no time to rest. The wounded keep coming. Your mind frays. You forget what day it is. You forget where you are. You forget why you started. You see things that aren't their shadows, faces, memories. You hear voices in the wind. You speak to the dead. You write letters to no one. You talk to yourself. You cry when no one is looking. And yet you continue, because they need you. Because you are the only doctor for miles. Because every life saved is a reason to keep going. You find strength in small things. A smile from a patient. A thank you from a nurse. A moment of silence. You hold on to them. You let them carry you. You begin to understand the cost of exhaustion. It is not just physical, it is spiritual. It wears down your soul. It steals your hope. It makes you question everything. But you do not stop, because the wounded keep coming. Because the war does not wait. Because you are still breathing. You've been in the mountains for weeks, maybe months. Time here is measured not by calendars, but by snowfall. by the number of wounded who pass through your cabin, by the number of graves you've marked with stones. But even as you fight disease, exhaustion, and despair, another battle simmers quietly around you, one of mistrust. The mountain folk are wary. They live in isolation, shaped by generations of self-reliance and suspicion. Their lives are governed by tradition, by oral wisdom passed down from elders, by remedies drawn from the forest and the soil. They know which roots to boil for fever, which leaves to chew for pain, which prayers to whisper over the sick. And they do not trust outsiders, especially not doctors. You arrive with your satchel of tools and your blood-stained apron, and they watch you from behind shuttered windows. They whisper in dialects thick with Old English and Scotch-Irish cadence. They call you sawbones, stranger, government man. They do not come to you unless they must. And even then, they come reluctantly. You treat a boy with a shattered leg. His mother stands in the corner, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. She asks why you didn't use comfrey root. She asks why you didn't wrap the wound in lamb's wool. You explain the risk of infection, the need for amputation. She shakes her head. That ain't the way we do it, she says. You treat a woman with typhoid. Her husband brings her to your cabin, but refuses to let you bleed her. He insists on a poultice made from bear fat and sassafras. You try to reason with him, but he leaves, carrying her back into the woods. She dies 2 days later. You begin to understand their skepticism. To them, medicine is not science, it is ritual, memory, faith. Your tools are foreign. Your methods are violent. Your presence is a reminder of a world they do not trust. You try to bridge the gap. You learn their remedies. You ask questions. You listen. You mix your treatments with there's willow bark for pain, yarrow for bleeding, elderberry for fever. You show them how to boil water, how to clean wounds, how to isolate the sick. Some begin to trust you. Most do not. You are accused of witchcraft. You are blamed for deaths. You are shunned by families. You are threatened by men with rifles. You are warned not to go near certain hollows. You are told to leave, but you stay. Because the wounded keep coming. Because the sick have nowhere else to go. Because even in distrust, there is need. You treat a girl with pneumonia. Her grandmother brings her, wrapped in quilts, eyes pleading. You work through the night, mixing your medicine with hers. The girl survives. The grandmother weeps. She calls you healer. You treat a man with gangrene. His brother watches silently, then helps you saw the leg. He brings you moonshine and bandages. He tells others. They begin to come. Slowly, the walls begin to crack. You are invited to homes. You are offered food. You are asked for advice. You are still a stranger, but now you are a useful one. You learn that trust is earned, not given. You learn that healing is not just physical, it is cultural, emotional, spiritual. You learn that medicine must adapt to survive. And you never stop fighting, because in these mountains, disease is not the only enemy. Fear is, ignorance is, isolation is, and you are here to fight them all. You came to the mountains with a surgeon's kit, not a rifle. But the war doesn't care. It doesn't distinguish between healer and fighter. In Appalachia, the front lines are everywhere and nowhere. The conflict seeps into the soil, into the trees, into the silence between gunshots. And you, the doctor, are not immune. You wake to the sound of musket fire. It's close. Too close. You grab your coat, your satchel, and step outside. Smoke curls over the ridge. A skirmish has erupted between Union scouts and Confederate raiders. You know what comes next. The wounded will arrive. But this time, they might not be alone. You've treated men with bullet wounds, saber slashes, burns. But you've also treated men with no uniforms, bandits, deserters, vigilantes. The war has fractured the region. Loyalties shift. Neighbors turn on each other. And anyone with medical skills becomes a target. You've been threatened before. A group of armed men once stormed your cabin, demanding you treat their comrade. You did. They left. But not before warning you. Help the wrong side again, and we'll be back. You've patched up Union soldiers and Confederate ones. You've treated civilians caught in the crossfire. You've tried to remain neutral, but neutrality is dangerous. It makes you suspicious to everyone. You begin to carry a pistol. You hide it under your coat, near your surgical tools. You hope you never use it, but you know you might. You fortify your cabin. You reinforce the door. You dig a trench behind the building. You keep watch at night. You sleep with one eye open. You treat a boy with a bayonet wound. He's barely 15. His brother stands guard outside, rifle in hand. You ask who attacked them. He says, doesn't matter. Could be anyone. You begin to understand the paranoia. The war is not just fought in battles. It's fought in whispers, in shadows, in sudden violence. You are always at risk. You are not trained for this. You are a healer, but now you are also a soldier. You learn to shoot. You learn to hide. You learn to run. You treat a man with a shattered arm. He tells you about a raid on a nearby village. Doctors were targeted. Nurses were killed. Supplies were stolen. He says, you're next. You write letters to military commanders, begging for protection. Sometimes they send a guard. Usually they don't. You are on your own. You begin to move your clinic. You change locations. You treat patients in barns and caves, in cellars. You keep your tools packed, ready to flee. You treat a woman with a gunshot wound. She says she was mistaken for a spy. She says the shooter was a neighbor. You stitch her wound, give her water, and wonder how long until someone mistakes you. You are exhausted. You are afraid, but you do not stop. Because the wounded keep coming. Because the war does not pause. Because even in danger, healing must continue. You become a symbol, not just of medicine, but of resilience. You are the doctor who stayed, the doctor who fought, the doctor who healed in the face of death. And you know that one day you might fall wounded too. But until then, you will keep your tools sharp, your pistol loaded, and your heart steady. Because in this war, every breath is borrowed, and every act of healing is defiance. The cabin creaks in the wind. Its walls are warped, its roof patched with bark and canvas. Snow seeps through the gaps, melting into puddles on the floor. The fire sputters in the hearth, barely warming the room. You wrap yourself in a blanket, but the cold finds you anyway. It always does. This is your home. This is your hospital. This is your battlefield. You sleep on a straw mattress, damp and infested. Lice crawl across your skin. Rats scurry beneath the floorboards. You wake to their scratching, their squealing, their gnawing. You've tried traps. You've tried poison. They always return. You share this space with the wounded. They lie on planks, on mats, on the floor. Their breath fogs the air. Their groans echo through the night. You move among them, your boots soaked, your hands numb. You treat their wounds, change their bandages, whisper comfort. You do not sleep. The winters are brutal. Snow piles against the door. Ice forms on the inside of the windows. The wind howls through the cracks. You wear 3 coats, 2 pairs of socks, a scarf. You still shiver. You still ache. You still cough. You fall ill. Everyone does. The cold weakens the body, invites infection. Pneumonia spreads. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, ears. You treat it with warm cloths, with whiskey, with prayers. Sometimes it works. Often it doesn't. You boil water constantly. For tea, for cleaning, for warmth. The firewood runs low. You send volunteers to chop more. They return frozen, exhausted, bleeding. You ration the wood. You ration the heat. You ration hope. The roof leaks. Rain drips onto patients. You move them, patch the ceiling, curse the weather. The walls mold. The floor rots. The cabin is dying. You are dying with it. You try to improve conditions. You dig trenches to divert water. You seal cracks with mud. You hang blankets over the windows. You build shelves to keep supplies dry. It helps, a little. You write letters. You beg for lumber, for nails, for tar. You receive silence. You are forgotten. You treat a man with hypothermia. His skin is blue. His pulse is faint. You wrap him in blankets. Place him near the fire. Feed him broth. He survives. Barely. You treat a child with lice. Her scalp is raw. Her eyes are swollen. You shave her head, apply salve, burn her bedding. She cries. You cry with her. You treat yourself. You boil your clothes. You scrub your skin. You sleep in shifts. You eat what you can hardtack, beans, salted pork. You lose weight. You lose strength. You lose time. You begin to understand the irony. The place meant to save lives is killing them. The cabin is a trap, a tomb, a cruel joke. And yet you stay, because the wounded keep coming, because the sick have nowhere else to go, because even in filth, healing must happen. You become part of the cabin. You know its sounds, its smells, its moods. You hate it. You love it. You endure it. And you never stop fighting. Because in this war, survival is not just about bullets. It's about cold. It's about rats. It's about mold. It's about living in a place that wants you dead and refusing to die. The fire crackles in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the cabin walls. You sit alone, your hands wrapped around a tin cup of lukewarm tea. Outside, the wind howls through the trees, a mournful sound that feels too familiar. Inside, the silence is heavier than the cold. You stare into the flames and see faces. The boy with the shattered leg, the woman with pneumonia, the soldier who whispered his mother's name as he died. They are all there, flickering in the firelight, watching you. You blink, rub your eyes, shake your head, but they remain. You are haunted. Every death leaves a mark. Every scream echoes. Every final breath lingers. You remember them all, their names, their wounds, their last words. You carry them with you, stitched into your memory like the sutures you tie each day. You begin to talk to them. Quietly, when no one is around, you apologize. You explain. You beg for forgiveness. You know it's madness, but it helps. A little. You question your faith. You were raised to believe in mercy, in purpose, in divine order. But here, in the mountains, surrounded by suffering, those beliefs falter. You see good men die and cruel men live. You see children buried and killers healed. You ask why. You receive no answer. You stop praying, and you start again. Then you stop. You question your sanity. You forget what day it is. You forget where you are. You forget who you were before the war. You look in the mirror and see someone else, someone older, harder, hollow. You write letters to no one. You keep journals filled with names, sketches, thoughts. You burn some. You hide others. You fear what they reveal. You dream of the dead. They speak to you. They accuse you. They comfort you. You wake in sweat, in tears, in silence. You begin to see the mountain differently. It is no longer majestic. It is monstrous. It looms over you, indifferent, eternal. It swallows sound, light, hope. It becomes a symbol of your isolation, your despair, your slow unraveling. You try to escape. You walk into the woods. You climb ridges. You sit by streams. You breathe. It helps, a little. You return to the cabin because the wounded are waiting, because the war does not pause, because even in madness, you are needed. You treat a man with a chest wound. He dies. You bury him. You mark his grave. You add his name to the list. You treat a child with fever. She survives. You smile. You cry. You remember why you stay. You begin to understand the toll. It is not just physical. It is not just emotional. It is existential. The war does not just kill bodies. It kills meaning. It kills belief. It kills the self. And yet you continue. Because every life saved is a light in the darkness. Because every wound healed is a defiance of despair. Because even in madness, there is purpose. You are a doctor. You are a mourner. You are a ghost. But you are still here. And that matters. You knew the risks when you arrived. You knew the wounds would be gruesome, the conditions harsh, the supplies scarce. But you didn't expect this, to watch your fellow doctors fall one by one, not to bullets or bayonets, but to the very diseases they tried to fight. It begins quietly. A cough, a fever, a tremble in the hands. You notice it in a colleague, a man who once worked beside you, tireless, focused, calm. Now he's pale, sweating, delirious. You try to treat him, but you know the signs. Typhoid, or dysentery, or pneumonia. It doesn't matter. The outcome is the same. He dies within days. You bury him behind the cabin, next to the patients he tried to save. You mark his grave with a stone. You say a few words. Then you return to work. But the pattern continues. Another doctor collapses during surgery. Another nurse faints while changing bandages. Another volunteer begins vomiting blood. You treat them all. you lose most. You begin to understand the cruel irony. The healers are dying faster than the wounded. There is no protection. No gloves, no masks, no antiseptic. You wash your hands in cold water. You boil your tools when you can. You breathe the same air as the infected. You sleep beside them. You eat from the same pots. You are exposed constantly. You try to isolate the sick. You designate corners of the cabin for fever patients. You hang blankets as barriers. You disinfect with whiskey and smoke. But it's not enough. The diseases spread invisibly through touch, through breath, through hope. You begin to feel it yourself. A chill, a cough, a weakness in your limbs. You ignore it. You work through it. You tell yourself it's fatigue. You tell yourself it's nothing. But you know better. You've seen the progression. You've watched it unfold in others. You know what comes next. You write a letter to your family, just in case. You treat yourself with herbs, with steam, with rest. You recover barely. But you are changed. Slower, weaker, haunted. You begin to track the deaths. You keep a list. Doctors, nurses, volunteers. The numbers grow. The names blur. You wonder how long until yours is added. You try to recruit replacements. You send messages to nearby towns. You plead with military officials. Sometimes someone arrives. Usually they don't. The reputation of your cabin precedes you. It is a place of healing and of death. You train locals. You teach them how to clean wounds, how to mix tinctures, how to comfort the dying. Some learn, some refuse. The fear is too great. You begin to understand the cost of caregiving. It is not just emotional. It is not just physical. It is existential. To heal in these conditions is to risk everything. To offer help is to invite death. And yet you continue. Because the wounded keep coming. Because the sick have nowhere else to go. Because even in danger, healing must happen. You become a symbol, not just of medicine, but of sacrifice. You are the doctor who stayed, the doctor who fought, the doctor who risked everything. And you know that one day, infection may claim you too. But until then, you will keep your tools sharp, your hand. The cabin was never meant to be a hospital. It was a hunting lodge once, or maybe a family home. Now it's a battlefield of its own, a place where the wounded come not to fight, but to survive. You step inside and are met with the familiar stench of blood, sweat, smoke, and sickness. The floor is slick. The air is heavy. The groans of the dying echo off the walls. You try to impose order. You mark beds with chalk and scraps of cloth. You designate corners for fever patients, for amputees, for those near death. You ration medicine 1 spoonful of quinine per day, half a dose of morphine per surgery, a single strip of clean bandage per wound. You keep a ledger, scribbled in pencil, tracking who received what, when, and why. You organize your tools. You boil water. You sharpen blades. You assign tasks to volunteers. You train locals in basic care. You set schedules, morning rounds, midday surgeries, evening burials. You try to make the chaos manageable, but disease does not care. It spreads through the air, through the water, through the touch of a hand. It leaps over your boundaries, ignores your charts, mocks your routines. One day you have 5 patients, the next 20, then 30, then more than you can count. You run out of space. You move patients to the porch, to the barn, to tents made from blankets and branches. You run out of supplies. You grind herbs into powder, tear shirts into bandages, use fishing line for sutures. You run out of time. You work through the night, your hands blistered, your eyes burning. You pray for miracles. You pray for a shipment of medicine. You pray for reinforcements. You pray for strength. Sometimes your prayers are answered. A wagon arrives with supplies. A nurse volunteers. A patient recovers. Often they are not. You treat a man with gangrene. You amputate his leg, cauterize the wound, administer whiskey. He dies anyway. You treat a child with typhoid. You isolate her, feed her broth, hold her hand. She dies anyway. You treat a woman with pneumonia. You warm her, medicate her, sing to her. She dies anyway. You begin to question everything. You question your methods. You question your training. You question your purpose. You question your sanity. But you do not stop, because the wounded keep coming, because the sick have nowhere else to go, because even in failure, healing must be attempted. You adapt. You innovate. You endure. You build shelves from crates. You hang lanterns from nails. You dig trenches to divert water. You create a system flawed, fragile, but functional. You become the center of a fragile ecosystem. Patients depend on you. Volunteers follow you. Locals respect you. You are not just a doctor. You are a leader, a builder, a symbol. And you know that every measure you take, no matter how desperate, is a step toward survival. Because in this war, hospitals are not buildings. They are acts of will. And medicine is not certainty. It is hope. The candle burns low, its flame dancing against the warped wood of the cabin walls. You sit at a rough-hewn table, your back aching, your fingers stiff from the cold. A scrap of paper lies before you, creased and stained. The stub of a pencil rests in your hand, worn down from weeks of use. Outside, the wind howls through the trees, rattling the shutters. Inside, the cabin is quiet too quiet. The wounded sleep, or they don't. The dead have been buried. For now, there is time to write. You begin the letter with pleasantries. I am well, you lie. The weather is cold, but the work continues. You mention the mountains, the beauty of the snow, the kindness of the locals. You do not mention the amputations. You do not mention the screams. You do not mention the smell of gangrene that clings to your clothes and follows you into your dreams. You write to your wife, your children, your parents. You tell them you miss them. You tell them you think of them often. You do not tell them about the boy who died in your arms, his breath rattling like dry leaves. You do not tell them about the nurse who collapsed from fever and never woke. You do not tell them about the pistol you keep under your pillow just in case the war comes through the door. You try to sound hopeful. You try to sound strong. You try to sound like the person you were before the war. But you are not that person anymore. You are tired. You are haunted. You are unraveling. You write about the patients who survived. You describe their courage, their gratitude, their resilience. You do not write about the ones who didn't. You do not write about the graves behind the cabin, marked with stones and scraps of wood. You do not write about the names you can't forget, the ones that whisper to you in the quiet hours. You fold the letter, seal it, and hand it to a courier. You watch him ride away, knowing the letter may never arrive, knowing that even if it does, it will not tell the whole story, because the real cost of saving lives here is invisible. It is the sleepless nights, the trembling hands, the cracked skin, the hollow eyes. It is the guilt, the doubt, the fear. It is the knowledge that you are not just healing others, you are sacrificing yourself. You begin to keep a journal, not for others, for yourself. You write the truth. You write the pain. You write the names. You write the memories. You hide it under your mattress, afraid someone might read it, afraid no one ever will. You read old letters from home. They speak of holidays, of harvests, of hope. They feel like messages from another world. You cry. You laugh. You remember. You ache. You write back. You tell them you are proud. You tell them you are doing your duty. You do not tell them that you are dying inside, that every day feels like a lifetime, that every patient lost feels like a failure carved into your bones. You begin to understand the nature of sacrifice. It is not just blood. It is not just time. It is not just effort. It is identity. It is peace. It is self. You give everything, and you ask for nothing, because the wounded keep coming, because the war does not pause, because healing must happen. You are a doctor. You are a writer. You are a witness. And your letters are the only proof that you are here. They are fragments of a life lived in service, in silence, in suffering. They are the echoes of a voice that refused to be drowned out by war. They are the last testament of a healer who stood between death and the dying and paid the price. The war ends, but the silence that follows is not peace, it is absence. The cannons fall quiet. The armies retreat. The flags are folded and stored away. But in the mountains, the echoes remain. The cabins are empty. The graves are full. And the doctors, many of them, are gone. They did not die in glory. They did not fall in battle, clutching rifles or charging lines. They died in the shadows, in the cold, in the quiet. They died of typhoid, of dysentery, of pneumonia. They died of exhaustion, of infection, of despair. They died with blood on their hands and hope in their hearts. They died anonymously. There were no bugles at their funerals, no medals pinned to their chests, no speeches given in their honor. Their names were not etched into monuments. Their deeds were not sung in ballads. Their sacrifices were not taught in classrooms. They were forgotten. But without them, even fewer would have lived. You walk through the cabin one last time. The beds are bare. The fire is out. The walls are scarred with soot and blood. You run your fingers along the wood, tracing the outlines of a place that held so much pain and so much courage. You remember the faces. You remember the screams. You remember the miracles. You step outside. The mountain air is crisp, biting. The snow crunches underfoot. You visit the graves behind the cabin's simple markers, some with names, some without. You kneel before one. You add another stone, another name. A doctor. No rank, no medals. Just a healer who gave everything. You write his story. You send it to the family. You hope they understand. You hope someone remembers. You think of your own fate. You survived. Barely. You are changed. You are haunted. You are grateful. You are not the same person who arrived here months ago with a satchel of tools and a heart full of purpose. You are older. You are quieter. You are carrying something invisible. You leave the mountains, but they never leave you. You carry the memories, the names, the sounds, the smells. You carry the lessons etched into your bones. You carry the legacy of those who died not for glory, but for mercy. You speak their names. You tell their stories. You honor their sacrifice, because death claimed them quietly, but their impact was loud. It lives in every soldier who walked again, in every child who survived the fever, in every family who buried their dead with dignity. It lives in the pages of journals, in the whispers of mountain folk, in the fading ink of letters home. It lives in you, in the blood-soaked shadows of the Civil War, far from the roar of cannons and the clash of armies. Another battle raged quiet, relentless, and largely forgotten. In the Appalachian Mountains, doctors fought not just disease and injury, but isolation, poverty, superstition, and despair. They worked with crude tools, in makeshift hospitals, under constant threat. They endured brutal winters, sleepless nights, and the psychological toll of watching death claim the very lives they tried to save. And often, death claimed them too. These healers were not celebrated generals or decorated heroes. Their names rarely appear in history books. But without them, countless soldiers and civilians would have died alone and untreated. Their sacrifice was invisible, their courage unspoken, their legacy buried beneath the weight of war. This video is not just a tribute, it's a reckoning. A reminder that medicine, in its rawest form, is not sterile or glamorous. It is human. It is flawed. It is brave. And in the mountains of Appalachia, it was everything.